Alright everyone, today's most important video I think has to do with the inflation rate because for October inflation hit a 30-year high. Inflation hasn't been this high since like I was still in diapers. This is at least in that metric the worst economy that we've had over the entire span of millennialdom. And considering we had to live through the Obama Great Recession, technically the Bush-Obama Great Recession, now I guess we have to live through Bidenomics, which is, I don't know, arguably worse. I keep hearing Biden crowing about the unemployment rate dropping and then not admitting that it's due to low labor force participation. Not that any president ever mentions that particular metric, because it's never particularly good and hasn't been since the 1970s and the growth of the welfare state. But I mean, 30-year high for inflation. Well, let's go, Brandon. No wonder people are hurting for certain. Some costs for certain goods are up like 30% year over year. It's insane. Virtually everything is more expensive than, in fact, I can't think of a single commodity or service that would be cheaper than it was a year ago. But remember, the economy is going in the right direction because you have like, 6% inflation, but the wages grew by 0.5%. Isn't that lovely? Wages grew. See? Haha, let's go Biden. Well, that's not reality for 99% of the public. I think that I speak for virtually anyone watching this when I say paying more and not necessarily making more doesn't generally work for the average person. Working class, middle class, etc. People that, in some cases are struggling to get by. In other cases, they're not a missed paycheck from the streets, but they've got debt, they've got other problems, they got a lot of costs to deal with. And the government is oblivious to this fact. Biden thinks this is a good economy. I'm not sure whether that's because he's demented and genuinely doesn't know. He's sheltered and literally doesn't know what's happening outside regardless of his mental state, or because he's just lying to people. I'm thinking it's a combination of at least two of those. You can guess which ones. Now, before I delve into this any further, because I mean it's basically grave humor when you're laughing at it, but Bidenomics is quite laughable. It's it's pure globalistic stupidity. Keep in mind there will be a pinned comment down below with links to 4 other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind, I make 2 or 3 exclusive videos every day on those platforms. Plus, potentially another platform will be re-added. I will be doing that via poll actually later, explaining in my 3rd video of the day, my 3rd main, which will go on YouTube now for participatory purposes. But anyway, I'll talk about that later. When inflation hits a 30-year high, can we say that it's not transitory? Because they told us that in like April. Well then, that was spring. Summer comes and goes. Autumn now is, fast fading on towards winter. And the inflation is not only still there, but getting worse. To be clear, I think this is the worst inflation numbers we've gotten so far. Yellen says it won't go away till mid-next second quarter, so May or June or something. Citigroup, which wants to be very optimistic about this not happening, is claiming that inflation won't peak till February, which I guess those two metrics are in line, where it peaks and where it sort of starts faltering, where it goes back to kind of normal. Here's the problem. The inflation rate is cumulative damage. If you have a period of excessive inflation, correct, which we have and will apparently continue to have even according to Biden's people, his fans, then you need a period of deflation afterwards to go back to the point where the wages and the costs are actually equivalent to what they were before. If you just go back to the old normal, you still have that excess inflation. It's just that it has disappeared in people's minds a little bit, and the value of money has simply depreciated considerably. It then takes a long time for wages to catch up. Now, the liberals think the answer is a bigger minimum wage. The problem is that would inflate the currency further. It would harm the poor. It would harm the people at the bottom. It would especially, let's say that you raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. You know who's harmed the most? People that were making $18, $19 an hour. They were making a reasonably good wage for most parts of the country. $18 an hour is survivable. You're not rich, you're working class, but you're not making minimum wage. You're not flipping burgers at that point, probably, unless you've been doing it for 30 years or you own your own restaurant. But now you're at the bottom again because you're barely above minimum wage. And chances are, because of the inflation of the currency and every other problem and the fact that costs will rise, you're not going to get much of a boost. You might get an extra raise, but it's not going to keep pace. You have fallen behind. The people that are affected by these welfare-style policies the most, lower middle class and working class. People who are beyond minimum wage, but they haven't achieved really middle class stability. And that core of the country is huge. It's like, what, 40% of your population? Most of the people in the middle class at this point, they're bumped down to lower middle class anyway because of Bidenomics, because of his tax and tax principles, etc. Now, the other problem is shortages. Part of this inflation is related to that fact. But it's not getting better, it's getting worse. Again, I hear scuttlebutt from all sorts of people. I've got dozens of people telling me, and they're working in shipping and shit, they don't expect it to get better, at least not anytime soon. You've got still brownout mode in Pacific ports. You have a huge loss of truckers, and then you're facing down the barrel of an economic gun with regards to the shortages, because if Biden's OSHA mandate passes the muster of the Fifth Circuit and gets imposed, or if they punt and they say, well, you have to take it up with SCOTUS, but you can impose it in the meantime as an emergency measure, we'll allow it for now, you're going to have a multi-month period where you have even less truckers, less dock workers, less everyone. And, by the way, a hugely shrunk military, because you'll have to fire 10-15% of the troops who refuse to get vaxxed. They're not going to be there anymore. I have a feeling that a large proportion, many tens of thousands of soldiers, would no longer be in the ranks. They'll say, fuck, who cares? You give me a dishonorable discharge. I don't want to be here anyway. There you go. Perfect recipe for fucking the economy even further. So we're at a 30-year high in inflation now, and things are getting worse. At what point do we literally reach Jimmy Carter levels of inflation? And at what point, by the way, does all these shenanigans affect unemployment and we end up with literal stagflation, even according to the liberals' definition? They're still holding off and saying, well, we got excessive inflation for an extended period of time. It's not great, but don't worry, it's not a recession and it's not stagflation. You know, the way we don't have mass unemployment, don't worry. Well, yeah, because of labor force participation. In order to hide the technically much higher unemployment rate, Biden won't get rid of the increased unemployment subsidies. It's helping him to hide the fact that we are in a stagflationary economy. When you start seeing shortages on shelves, wages far outpaced by inflation, inflation at 30-year highs or at decade-long highs, and the labor force participation rate is as low as it is, the only reason you're not using the term stagflation is because the unemployment rate on the surface appears smaller. But it's arguably even worse, because on those benefits, the people that are out of work are gaining even more money. And the taxpayers are funding that. By the way, just so that everyone's aware, that's adding to the inflation too. That's millions and millions of people more than in the 70s. Then it was pennies on the dollar, basic welfare handouts, Jimmy Carter style. Now it's, hey, we're basically paying you nearly the same wage you were making before, thus incentivizing most people not to seek a job at all. If I can stay home, I'm not using gas, no wear and tear on my vehicle, I don't have to actually work, I can do literally whatever I want, and make 85-90% of my income, then unless I was on a shoestring budget to begin with, and I'm 10 cents per paycheck away from being broke, unless I'm in that category, well, I can work for 40 hours and get $1,000 or whatever. Or I can work 0 hours and get $900. Oh, come on. Like you wouldn't consider that a significant opportunity for you. Hey, I can spend the next year playing video games. I can spend I can learn a skill. Now, there are some people that are taking advantage of it, and it's a good thing. They're saying, well, I'm out of the wagey cage. I'm going to practice guitar. I'm going to write a book or something. That's great. By the way, kudos to you. You're one of the intelligent ones for not using it as a de facto goof-off time. But there are people that are. Quite a few of them. Millions of individuals are doing that right now, and they're not counted as unemployed because of the expanded unemployment. They're not seeking a job. There's no reason to seek a job. Why the fuck would they want one? Biden is just giving them handouts that amount to basically what they were making before. So, yeah, technically speaking, at least if you go beyond the surface, if you go beyond the superficial treatments of MSNBC or something, it's already stagflation. I hate to tell you, but the 70s are back, and these numbers just prove it even more. That's about all. Peace out.